Hello and welcome to the CBB Super Show, brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuce 85, that niche sports connoisseur you all know, you all love. We're out here doing our thing. We are officially into February. February it is, January. Put that behind us. We are in it. Home stretch just about. Before you know it, conference tournaments will be here. It is going to be a blink of the eye. One shining moment's going to be playing. We're all going to be teary-eyed, and then all of a sudden the transfer portal is going to open back up, and it's going to be chaos. But for now, we still have plenty of opportunities to make money, whether that's from DFS, our main source here, betting opportunities, prize picks, underdogs, all of this stuff. Fliff, wherever you might play up, wherever you have an ability to play any kind of college basketball or college sports in general, we're out here, we're doing our thing. Appreciate your guys' continued support. You've been showing me a lot of love, which I do appreciate. I hate to be one of those people who continues to ask, but I'm going to do it anyways. Please make sure if you're watching on YouTube, drop a like there. You guys have been doing a fantastic job with that. If you're watching on Twitter/X, why don't you jump over to YouTube, come over here and drop us that like. Any interactions also help. Comments, questions, concerns, anything on demand or live. All of that stuff helps in an algorithm-driven world of social media. You are doing us a very big solid. The weekend is behind us. It was a wild one. There was some chaos to be had, and there's like injuries galore, more than I can remember at any one point over the last couple of years. We've always had bouts of sickness. We've had injuries happen. We've had all this various things go down. But man, it seems like every single slate we are dealing with a plethora of injury news and guys that we're aware of coming into it and some that we're not. And then we think this guy, well, he hasn't practiced for 3 weeks. He's not going to play. Suddenly he's starting playing 30 minutes. This guy's been practicing all week. He's definitely in. All of a sudden he's not playing. So it's been really wacky. The best thing you can do, the most solid you can be, the most knowledgeable and up-to-date on news that you can be, joining FTN for the Discord alone. We basically hit, not even basically, we do hit on every single bit of news. Starting lineups never get past us. If they're posted, you turn that off. I was listening to a betting podcast. All right, get that off of there. Apologies for that. If there's pre-lock, if there's anything that we are basically going to see, like somebody's out, there's a sickness, there is, oh my God, starting lineup change, something different, we're not going to miss it if it's pre-lock. Post-lock, that's tough. We're in message boards. We're in different communities. We're always checking every avenue that we can from a social media perspective. If it's out there and the beats are doing their job, we're not going to miss it. And that's a very hard thing to do. If you're, you've got kids, you've got your family, about lock time, it's dinner time, you're trying to set lineups, you're hoping you don't get tagged with a late scratch or somebody out, or damn, why did I miss that news? It's very hard, admittedly. So let us do it for you. We have a great community at FTN. It's not just me posting stuff there. Yes, I post the projections. Yes, I give the articles in my opinion, but we have some really sharp, smart community members and subscribers in our Discord across all sports, and they're very helpful. And when we tag everybody when that news comes down, we save people from getting caught with late scratches. Dylan Adewusu for Seton Hall just, what was it, yesterday? Very late into the day. Sundays have been pretty big edge with news. Suddenly he's not in. He was playing last week. He was going to start. Still 15 to 18% owned across multiple contests. That's a pretty big amount for a guy that's taking a bagel. If there's a showdown slate for one of those, that's a big one. We frequently see guys who are scratched or out being 35 to 50% owned on showdown. Huge edge. At this point of the season where everybody has access to the same info, projections, if they're sharp, are coming pretty close within each other of the same type of plays. We're seeing a lot of overlap with lineups. Our news edge, our knowledge edge, that is what carries us over the top. So give us a shot at ftnfantasy.com. Pricing page there shows you we have betting stuff. We have season-long dynasty, all of that as well, an all-in-one package, DFS Plus, everything and anything that you could possibly need. The shows will continue to be journeying through here. Right now we're doing Monday, Tuesday, and Friday nights. Here in the next couple of weeks, we'll expand out. We'll start doing Saturday nights as well. And then we're going to have the Selection Sunday show. And then it's going to be wall-to-wall nonstop content from a short form, long form, written, verbal, audio, video, every kind of way, every which way. And a source that you know and trust and maybe like a little bit as well. Listening to some of this betting Twitter shows lately just for entertainment while I'm doing my thing, man, there's a lot of scamming shill people out there. And I hope that you guys continue to come here because you trust the info, you like me a little bit, and you know what? I won't steer you wrong on purpose. Yes, we'll have some cold streaks. Yes, we'll have some hot streaks, but at the end of the day, we're always going to own those plays, and we're going to play who we say we're going to play. And for that matter, bet who we say we're going to bet. Alcorn State, we love you, plus 5.5 tonight. Mid-major and low-major bets have been our bread and butter. Prop betting has been solid. We're going to keep journeying on here, soldiering on. Appreciate you guys. That's my spiel. Let's get into it. If you're new to the show, what we do here, we go game by game from a DFS perspective. We typically talk DraftKings, but FanDuel definitely worthwhile. We do cover that as well. I will say FanDuel has continued to be the softer of the two sites, especially price-wise. A lot of my members, I've been telling them, till I'm blue in the face, hey, FanDuel is really soft. Their pricing is bad. Get over there. There's a lot less overlap. Better profitability. Yes, there's not a lot of contests, but we did have Brett Belke, one of my main guys, my right-hand man. He definitely just took down the $2 on FanDuel earlier today. Yes, it's a $200 to first, but you know what? It's $200. Contest size is not the greatest there. Contest overall options not the greatest, but it continues to be a softer place to play. Takedowns are takedowns upon takedowns. We'll do it. FanDuel is where it's at right now, but we're going to be covering a lot of DraftKings because they just have more offerings, and that's where the better of the two is in terms of options, right? But we're going to play on both. We also talk about Prize Picks and Underdog if there's any prop betting stuff there. I do give a 2 to 3 man core, and also have typically a posh play of the day, which is basically our version of a sneak play of the day. Somebody that we feel will be under 30% owned but has a chance to break the slate, aptly named after the infamous or famous Posh Alexander. You might look at his date and numbers and say, why would you name anything after him? Posh Alexander is a very near and dear piece to this show. We love him, and he is an absolute stud, and I won't tolerate any slander about Posh Alexander. And then also added to the show here are projections, which we're very proud of. So while I'm talking about things, giving out some DVP stuff, efficiency numbers, all of that good stuff, you will be able to see the projections on the screen next to me for each game that I'm talking about. With that being said, let's get into it. I wish we had a cool little Wayne's World Scooby-Doo ending here to get it on the screen, but let's get after it. All right. Boom. There we go. First game that we are going to talk about here, Marquette versus St. John's will lead us off. It's a total of 147. St. John's 3-point favorites. As far as injuries go, and we're gonna do this with how I do the article. Give projected starting lineups, which I'm not going to get into as much tonight, just because I don't want to go for 2+ hours on an 8-game slate. And then I do injury designations before giving my single entry and MME entry plays. Injury designations for this game were pretty clean. Marquette doesn't have anything that we don't already know. Sean Jones, season-long injury, stuff like that. And Davon Smith, who has been in and out for St. John's, is available, did play over 22 minutes last game, so we expect him to be in as well. So the good news is we should have everybody available to us. Keyword being should. These are games that we expect to be clean, but we go into it, all of a sudden, this player is sick. He's not warming up. What's going on? Panic. Everybody freak out. So just be advised and ready for that. It is a little bit of a smaller slate than when we're used to 8 games. We're kind of typically accustomed to seeing 10 at minimum. We have been blessed with 12 to 13, 14 game slates. I know I'm one of the psychos that really likes those big slates. But 8-gamer, we can definitely kind of keep this one easier to keep track of injuries and be able to process this info. That's the other part of it with the injury news. Processing that info, knowing who to swap to, if to hold, and how to kind of process all that information. All right. Starting with the Marquette side, we have a myriad players that we can use here. The starting lineup for Marquette is pretty much absorbing all the minutes. We know that the bench pieces like Zeddy Lowry, Royce Parham, Trey Norman, Caden Hamilton, those types, not going to play more than 5 to 8 minutes typically. One may get hot a la Royce Parham and maybe play 11 to 12 minutes, but for the most part, we don't need to look at them. The main decision you're going to have here is if you want to play Cam Jones, who is still extremely cheap overall at 8.7K. Now, he has been underproducing a bit for Cam Jones standards, but looking at this Marquette team and the way that they just got absolutely destroyed at home by UConn, they made it respectable towards the end, but they were completely manhandled in that game. They've become so reliant on Cam Jones that if he has a bad shooting night, shot 9 of 20, they're in a lot of trouble. Yes, they've been able to pull some good games out of Stevie Mitchell, David Joplin. We've seen Ben Gold have some good ones. Chase Ross has had some slate breakers. But for the most part, if Cam Jones isn't dialed in scoring 25-plus points, this Marquette team is in a lot of trouble. These coaches, these teams, their opponents, they all know that coming in, and they're making life extremely difficult for Cam. Did have a stretch there against Butler, Villanova, and Seton Hall where his shooting was better, but he has been bricking a ton of shots, and overall it's impacted his game extremely negatively because he has, in the last 5 games, failed to eclipse 35 fantasy points in 4 of those last 5. We're accustomed to Cam Jones dropping these 40s and 50s on us and his price being up over 10K. At 8.7, this is the cheapest he has been since the beginning of the season. Yes, it's a matchup with St. John's. Not great on paper. They have a lot of opportunistic perimeter defenders. They cause a lot of havoc, a lot of chaos. I don't love this road spot for Cam Jones. The projections obviously do, because for the most part, he's been very sound. And you have a great high usage, high rate guy like Cam Jones, down price low at 8.7. Hitting his 39 to 40, which we're accustomed to. Yes, he's a very good play at 4.5x return expectation. Problem is he hasn't been playing like that as much with these missed shots. If St. John's can get into his shorts and really cause him to shoot poorly, we drop down to somewhere in the 32-33 range. It becomes a real problem. That 8.7 suddenly feels real bad. So yes, he projects well, but I don't know that Cam Jones is the slam here against St. John's. Slam a couple of games ago and he didn't come through for us, but this may keep his ownership level a bit low, and that's something that interests me a great deal in the Mania qualifiers, the large field GPPs, all of that stuff. Chase Ross is nice secondary option at 6.6K. He's really kind of shouldered some of that offensive load for Cam Jones as well. I'm usually always a little bit skittish on Chase Ross. He does have strong rates. He's a really good defender, and he does get stocks. This offensive explosion that we've seen from him here recently, I don't know that that's going to be a consistent or predictable thing going forward. Towards the middle part of December, he had these really big offensive games, almost seemingly out of nowhere, and then we saw him did have some injuries, kind of go back to being more of a defender, more of a second, third, or fourth option. But he's been taking on more of that load, especially against UConn, where he scored 19 real, and especially against Villanova, where he scored 18 real in that one. So if you're not playing Cam Jones, it's definitely a good idea to get to Chase Ross, but both are more GPP options to me. I know their projections look really good, but this is a slate with a lot of mispricing from what I can tell, a lot of decent value as well, because there's so many injury and news that we're going to have to look at and kind of anticipate and predict. And it's going to allow this slate to be pretty high scoring, I think. And also a lot of guys are going to project pretty well around that 4x number, but I don't know that that's going to necessarily be enough. We may have to angle for more 5x, 6x production here on a slate where we expect 250 plus to kind of be maybe where that cash line ends up. There's going to be some landmines. We know that, so maybe it balances out. But I do, looking at this one, if the injuries that we see are out, we're going to have a lot of value. Also been messing with the team projection screen, which you can see right here. This little fancy number is the R squared. This is the implied total from sportsbooks. And then this is the projected total that comes up from our system. So you see like Marquette implied total 68. The projections are giving them 74, 75. So what I'm doing manually is taking a few of those points away to kind of balance that out, because our projection is a little bit higher. You can see it fairly close in a game like Purdue, 85, 82. That's pretty close. But here in Minnesota, 74 compared to 66. Some of these guys are going to project a little bit better than they probably should. And this is the pre-refinement, pre-edited version. I did do the minutes. So all the minutes that you see on the screen, I feel pretty good about, knowing what we know about injuries. So you can look at it that way, but just know that there are some guys who are going to be a little over projected, and I will call those out as we go through them. Not a lot of interest for me elsewhere. Stephen Mitchell, 7K. He has his moments. David Joplin, same, but it's just mainly a decision between Cam Jones and Chase Ross. And I'm not really too keen on targeting them against St. John's. On the Johnny side, it's always a question of Zuby Ejiofor or RJ Lewis. We were pretty high on Zuby coming into the weekend. All of that injury news that came through for Tennessee and some other guys kind of pushed us away, and we had the salary to go up to RJ Lewis. He didn't have a bad game by any means. He hit around 30 at 8.9. Now his price is 8.6, which makes him a great play once again. The problem is he has not gone over 30 at any point in the last 3 and only once in his past 5. We're getting to this point in the season. Guys are banged up. Guys are getting tired. RJ Lewis plays a ton of minutes. He has done a lot for this team. Highest usage rate, high shot rate. He's great across the board. We're used to him just kind of pummeling in there. And if he shoots bad, he's still putting up 40. But we're seeing a little bit of a drop off there in production. I think some of that has to do with the fact that teams have figured them out to a degree, right? They've got enough film and preparations, but also these guys are tired. When you watch the games, you can tell that. And obviously some of these locker rooms that have norovirus going through, that's painfully obvious because you see they're looking exhausted even more. Zuby is priced there at 7.5. Real good price for him. He's been under 30 fantasy points in each of his last 5 as well. Marquette is a front court that coming into the season, I thought we were going to have a strong DVP look here. I thought they'd get dominated on the front court a lot, which is Ben Gold being there, but they've held their own for the most part. However, they have sprung the leak a little bit here. It is becoming more of a favorable spot for opposing big men. Their total numbers for the year, they look like a pretty stout defense, but this is a targetable area. Zuby at 7.5 is very intriguing to me. I don't know if I'm going to end up there with him because of all this other injury news and things that are opening up to us from a viability standpoint, but we have to admit that is a really cheap price. Last time he was 7.5, we jammed him in there against Xavier. He played 39 minutes in that one. Had 28.5. It wasn't a great game. It wasn't a bad game. It's a nice safe floor, but I really need to see that ceiling from him. And I think on this slate, we're going to need no less than 35 from him. Projections wise, I feel pretty confident about where we have him, about 32, which is a well over 4x, but I do want to see a little bit more from him as well. RJ Lewis, as usual, projecting quite well. And then you get into those secondary looks. Davon Smith being back does make me a little bit nervous on Simeon Wilcher, who projects decently there. Wilcher is so cheap at 4.7. Even with Smith around, he still played 35 minutes there against Providence. He continues to play heavy minutes. So not as much of a worry there. We know he's going to be on the floor. There's not a ton of upside, but at that price, playing 35 minutes, definitely have to have some interest. I have him tentatively penciled in there for 31 minutes just in case they decide to ramp up Davon Smith. And of course, we know Aaron Scott, Kadary Richmond, all of those guys are going to get those minutes as well. All the secondary bench pieces, really not so much. It's about a 6-7 man rotation for the most part. And then you see those spot minutes for guys like Jaden Glover, Vince Uchukwu, those type of options. Still a decision for me between RJ Lewis and Zuby Ejiofor. Simeon Wilcher is a secondary value at best in this one for me. All right, moving on to the next game here, Purdue versus Iowa. Purdue is a 7.5 point favorite, total of 154. As usual, Iowa, we were told by multiple people, especially on the Wisconsin side of things, that Iowa could not play defense. You may remember that Kamari McGee interview after the Iowa game. It says they weren't willing to play defense. We knew it. We took it to them. Well, this is one of the more fantasy-friendly groups in the country. Iowa does not play a lot of defense. Funny enough, they have actually muddied the waters a little bit their last couple of games, like the Minnesota game, like Penn State, Ohio State. There were some pretty poor returns there from those options, but I'm not scared. I'm still willing to stack Iowa games. I'm just going to continue to do it the way I do with UCF and ASU games. Both of those teams have been extremely good to us. And I'm just not willing to drop off from them at any point. They're profitable for us more often than not. And I think that's going to continue to be the case here with this Iowa team. And we have some pretty, season-altering news when it comes to this Iowa club. Let me get my right screen pulled up here. This is a game where we're simply going to want plenty of exposure. Do I think the over 154 is in play? Absolutely. Do I think Purdue is a solid look as a betting favorite? Absolutely. This Iowa team has trouble. It was just announced earlier today that Owen Freeman, their top front court player, is going to miss the remainder of the season. He has a finger injury and he had surgery I believe, earlier today. That to me, I don't know about you guys, but that screams to me that he will be transferring and hitting the portal here real soon. Taking a finger injury to surgery at this stage of the season. Obviously, Iowa, they're not probably going to make the tournament sans a really remarkable run. I mean, they're 13-8. They could potentially win out and still have enough juice here, right? They're 65th on Ken Palm. They're probably most likely will need to win the Big Ten tournament when it's all said and done, but it's possible. Never say never, never. Oregon State a couple years ago with Wayne Tinkle on the morphine drip made that improbable tournament run. Georgetown with Patrick Ewing on the morphine drip made that improbable run through the Big East tournament. It's possible, but most likely not for this Iowa team. And I just feel like Owen Freeman is going to be out the door heading the transfer portal. Just this season's not going anywhere. So wanted to get that opinion off and tell you guys that I think Freeman's going to transfer. He might wait a little bit and not be a total, dick and hit the portal right away, but I think he's headed for the transfer portal. But that gives us some extreme value here, and two players in particular, maybe three, but two in the particular, one being the sophomore Seydou Traore, priced there at 4-1. I already am a big fan of Traore. Every Iowa slate, I always talk to our resident Iowa expert, Mark Zilla, who is near and dear to that program. Noticed Traore played those 27 minutes against Minnesota. Wondered if that would have continued. Only played the 13 against Penn State there, but did bounce back, play 20 real solid minutes against Ohio State. It was a game that got a little out of hand there. They got buried, started to make it respectable, but it was really not that competitive. 13 points, 3 rebounds, and a block. I think he's the favorite to step in and start for Owen Freeman. And when you look at Seydou, he has some really good numbers. Last year for Manhattan, he was a total stud. 5% block rate, 2% steal rate. He has a combined rebounding rate knocking on the door of 20%, knocking down about nearly 28 to 30% of his threes. So he's got that range. He's only 6'7", so we're not talking about like a giant guy to step in at center, but I do think he will get some small ball 5 numbers, and he's a good enough rebounder and rim protector to really run that spot. Has a usage rate over 20% and has shown with minutes to be a fully capable option. Now we'll probably also see some Laj Dembele, some Riley Mulvey, Price Sandfort. Those are the other options, but from a DFS perspective, I think Seydou Traore there at 4-1 and Price Sandfort there also at 4-1 are the most likely to see spikes in minutes as they shift things around. Price is another player that has shown with additional minutes he can produce quite well. I think I really want to go with the starter between those two, and if it's not either of them and they go right to Riley Mulvey, who would be the next in line for center minutes, he's there at 3-2 as a starter. I would have to at least consider him to a degree. Foul rate be damned. He did play 11 minutes against Ohio State there. They got blown out against UCLA. He played 13 minutes there, 6 points, 3 rebounds, a block. He actually looked pretty solid against UCLA's second unit. So at least some interest to a degree with Riley Mulvey. The book on him, not great overall rates in terms of usage, as you can imagine, but he does have a 21.1% defensive rebounding rate, a 13% offensive rebounding rate, a block rate of 5%, and then a foul rate just tipping over 5.5%, or 5.5 fouls per 40, excuse me. So variety of options here. I will juggle the minutes around. I only have Mully at 5. Dembele at 17, Price 24, Traore 27. You can see at 27, Traore is an absolute slate breaker. Maybe I'm a little bit too gung-ho on him, but offensively, he is the one that offers the most as a direct replacement for Owen Freeman. Defensively might be another story. It's going to be a very small lineup if they run with a Price Sandfort or a Traore, but I just don't know that Mulvey's going to step in there and play these huge minutes. But I think between Dembele and Traore, you see a lot more of that splitting the 5. If Traore doesn't start, that's almost better for me personally, because maybe that keeps his rostership down. I do think we see a lot of ownership on the one that starts, obviously, but there's some variety of plays here. And if you're doing the multi-entry thing, you definitely want to sprinkle in a little bit of each Dembele, Price, and Traore along with Mulvey. As far as the others, you can see this is a very fantasy-friendly game. Purdue, without Zach Edey, they're an easier team to do things against as well. So pretty much everyone, taking Freeman out of the equation, projects pretty well, and they're all priced very affordable. Peyton Sandford being the one that tortures the DFS community the most. but probably the most interesting overall at 7-5 and the one with legitimate 60-plus fantasy point upside. Josh Dix, Drew Thelwell, and Brock Hardy have all had their moments. They're all fine. They project well, as you can see, but I'm really diving in headfirst to that situation with the Owen Freeman replacement. And even if it's not Seydou Traore as the starter, I think he plays well over 20 minutes, and at 4-1, I'm in on him. You can see we lower his minutes down to 20. He's not quite a slate breaker, but still easily over 4x and somebody that I think we can put into our lineups. Also really like Price Sandfort for the same reasons, just because rates-wise, he's a little more polished, if you will, than a guy like Riley Mulvey. And maybe we see Cooper Koch come back from the dead as well. But that is a situation that we clearly want to monitor here for Iowa. Speaking of Cooper Koch, he is questionable once again. Purdue comes out clean on the injury standpoint. Decision to be made. Braden Smith at 10.5K. If you're going to pay up for anybody, and there are a variety of ways to go in this slate, it's only an 8-gamer, but we have so many different options like Sorber versus Xavier, got my man Fremantle, Marcus Burton versus FSU's carcass of a program. Speaking of which, we'll get into that about Lenny Hamilton. The clear top pay up, and he's the most expensive on the slate, so it's not as if I'm dropping any knowledge here, but Braden Smith at 10.5, more so than Dawson Garcia, who does have a nice on-paper matchup with Penn State, but we prefer him at home typically. More than Thomas Sorber, who does look like he could absolutely terrorize Xavier, but on the road as well. Gary Richmond's a little overpriced for my taste. Marcus Burton had a pretty big down game last time out. Ace Baldwin we're rarely paying for, although he's good. And then the decision on Cam Jones, and then you've got that tier of St. John's guys. So Braden Smith, obviously, the clear path to paying up, and somebody that I think could absolutely drop a 50-plus bomb here. Double-double, like almost certainly. And I think he might flirt with a triple-double as well. There's going to be a big opportunities. The way he kind of dominated against Indiana there in the first half, that was vintage Braden Smith. Very, very excited to roster him. I will find a way, and we have the value to make it happen. So that is my top pay up. Just so happens to be the most expensive. I typically don't throw that at you guys, you know it, but sometimes it really is that easy. As far as anyone else, Trey Kaufman-Renn is affordable at 8.5. Should be able to take some Iowa front court players to school. I think he's going to draw a bunch of fouls. That's why if it was Mulvey to start, I'd be really worried about him getting 2 instantly against TKR. Not as worried about Traore, but the person that has to end up, kind of guarding the space that TKR is going to be doing his work in. I don't have a lot of envy for them. This could be a sneaky good game for TKR for that reason. So he's definitely an option at 8.5 as well. All of the value pieces on Purdue are pretty disgusting at this point, for lack of a better term. CJ Cox there saw a little under 22 minutes last time out. We know he's an extremely up and down performer, still extremely young as well. Only 1 shot taken against Indiana. He has his ups and downs. There's merit to using him here against Iowa. You can pretty much use anybody in an Iowa game, and I would not tell you not to. But I am going to be light on Purdue value. I think I want the Iowa value. The Purdue pay-ups is how I'm going to kind of really attack this one. It is worth noting that Camden Heide, there at 3.7, played 27 minutes against Indiana coming into the season. I know a lot of people did, myself especially, thought Camden Heide was really going to take that next step up and be a 30-minute per game player. Haven't really seen it from him. Defensively, he's been pretty suspect there, and his three-point shot hasn't developed the way I thought either. He did look pretty solid at spurts against Indiana, but 27 minutes, maybe we see more of him. He's technically the upperclassman to those, Miles, Bunny Colvin, Burgess, Jakari Harris, Cox, all those younger guys. They're just looking for some consistency in a third option, really. So there is some merit to using Heide there at 370, somewhat interesting. If you were to jump into the starting lineup, I think I might be close to pulling the trigger there because I do like Camden Heide. We had a little nice run with him last year in the tournament, and he's definitely viable. Fletcher Lawyer's a little expensive for my taste, and Caleb First, no thanks. Really never, ever using Caleb First these days. I know he's cheap and he gets his minutes, but it's Caleb First. All right, next game on the slate here, we have Minnesota. Minnesota versus Penn State. It's a total of 142.5. The Nittany Lions are 7.5-point favorites. Minnesota reeling a bit, arguably the hottest team in the Big Ten coming into the weekend. But they ran into your boys from the Pacific Northwest on Montlake. the Washington Huskies, America's team. You guys know it. At the barn, just great Osabor, Tyler Harris getting the job done, knocking some sense into Minnesota, reminding our friends in the Midwest who is the boss. That was a great win for the Huskies. Absolutely a great win for the Huskies. Now Minnesota has to go and play here against Penn State on the road. Definitely some higher projections in this game. Penn State defensively, I'd like to think under Rhodes that they're a lot better. And it kind of happened in my mind from those the VCU days where it's like, man, you don't want to target those games too much. But here at Penn State, they're playing extremely fast tempo, 46th in the country, 74th in defensive efficiency, 46th in offensive efficiency, but they're just pushing the pace so much. Defense is being sacrificed. They are losing a ton of games in conference. I think Minnesota definitely has a capability to be close in this one and cover the spread. So betting wise, I do think there's merit to betting Minnesota, but for the most part, I tend to stay away from that dangerous Minnesota team. Did see some shakeups there in the rotation. The starting lineup has been steady and true. But Parker Fox played just 7 minutes in that game. We saw a hell of a lot more Frank Mitchell, which kind of seems like, not to be confused with Mike, seems like that's been trending in that direction. He played 18 minutes against Iowa and Michigan, played 14 against Oregon. It's kind of been trending upwards. And then we saw him play that 23 against Washington. Did get in some foul trouble, but when he was on the floor, he looked pretty good. I wonder if we could see some shift there with Frank Mitchell stepping in to play the 4 over Parker Fox. I think that really would be the smart move for the team at this point. In that game, a close game, we saw Femi Odekale played 36 minutes, Luchai Patterson 35, Mike Mitchell 34, and Dawson Garcia 30. I think we're seeing a situation where it turns into Minnesota relies on their starters a lot in this game, 30-plus minutes, and then we see Isaac Asuma, Frank Mitchell, and Parker Fox, those three, some combination of those. You can see here prices on Mike Mitchell extremely cheap at 5.7, Patterson really cheap at 5.8, and then Femi at 6.3, all definitely in play. The one I would be the most interested in would be Patterson. I think that he is your best bet if you're not paying up for a Dawson Garcia, who is expensive at 10K. Does have a interesting matchup against Penn State. I think he certainly will have a chance to have a good game. But I want to go a little bit cheaper in this game if I can. And the Patterson play at 5.8 just kind of really screams to me there, especially considering he's been mostly a 7K player throughout the season. He has been in a funk lately, under 25 fantasy points in 4 straight. But like we saw in the Michigan game where he balled out 22-6, perfectly capable there against a tough Maryland team, 15-5-3, and then against Ohio State, 26-4. So be looking for that type of performance here from him against Penn State. So that is where most of my interest lies. Mitchell has kind of got us a bunch this year. He always projects fairly decently, but I don't want to get too involved there, and I don't want to pay over 6K for Femi Odekale. Frank Mitchell, if he were to start, there's value there at 4 or 5. Scored 20-plus DK points in 2 of his last 4. On the Penn State side, it's frustrating. They've had some stuff as well. Puff Johnson, once again, questionable, leaning more towards doubtful, so I don't know that we'll see him. Nick Kieran has been the main benefactor there as he started for Puff Johnson. We know Ace Baldwin's going to play all the minutes he can handle. Yannick Conan Niederhauser is in a good position if he can stay out of foul trouble, and that's usually a big if. If he can get above the 25, 26-minute range, he's a great overall GPP look at 7.2. I think he can do some damage offensively, but defensively, he just isn't too interested. He goes for the highlight blocks, but you see him out of position a lot. If you watch Penn State games closely and you watch footwork and you like to watch plays breakdown, he gets caught out a lot, and I think that's caused him to maybe lose some minutes in key spots. You also have Zach Hicks, who's never met a shot he wouldn't take. Usually not that interested in him at that 7.1 price point. And then you have the secondary looks, the Freddie Diones at low 5K range. DeMarco Dunn, also around the low 5K range. They've been kind of trading minutes there. Dunn's looked pretty decent. Dione's not looked as good lately. And then Nick Kieran there at 7.3. So not a ton of interest for me on Penn State. Again, you see a couple of guys projecting over 4X value there, but I think there's a little bit of a trappy feel to this Penn State game. It also feels like the game most likely to hit overtime, which is something we see from Northwestern usually, but I also feel like we see that in Minnesota as well. So a game that I think is going to be a make it or break it for this slate. If you get too involved with it and it breaks out, it's going to be very, very tough. But if you don't get enough and it blows out, or breaks up, you may have a hard time there if you only have one piece of exposure. So I have to really kind of analyze that one and think it over as you're building lineups out, especially in single entry. All right, next game on the slate here, Notre Dame versus Florida State. Florida State's a 2.5-point favorite. We'll see. And a total of 143. Notre Dame looks pretty clean here. Not a lot to worry about from an injury perspective. Florida State, on the other hand, not so much. They have multiple pieces here that we will have to look out for and could turn into some potential value elsewhere. So we have to be on our head on a swivel here as we look through the news. First being Taylor Bowen. He was one of the Posh Play 1A on the weekend slate there, or the last time Florida State was on. He did score a solid against Virginia Tech, 14-9. Did get a concussion, did not play in the last game. He was not in the starting lineup, and they were kind of oddly quiet about it. And it was just a situation of, they shook up the starting lineup, and that's all they really said. And I was thinking, why would they do that? Taylor Bowen's been arguably their best player in conference. Come to find out he has a concussion, and that's why he didn't play. So questionable to play here. Concussions can be tricky. We know that. Don't want to rush guys back. He's an awesome play at 6K, even though coming back from a concussion is a little spotty. I love Taylor Bowen. I think he rebounds well. He can shoot. He does enough of everything that I feel like he's even become a little bit more important to the team than even Jameer Watkins. Perhaps that's a hot take, but he is definitely my preferred look of Florida State usually. Jerry Dang got the start in that game over Taylor with him out. Wouldn't you know it, within 3 minutes, Jerry Dang turned his ankle. He missed the rest of the game. He's officially questionable, has not practiced. So we may see Jerry Dang, who is a pretty important sub, secondary piece who plays about 15 to 18 minutes a game. And then, of course, a starter in Taylor Bowen, who would be next to step up and start there. Probably someone like A.J. Swinton, who did play 19 minutes in the game against BC once Dang went down. 10 points, 4 rebounds for him there, hit 4 of 6, a couple of threes. He's priced there at 3.3, so potential value for Swinton. Look at the projections here under FSU. You can see I only have Swinton at around 15 right now, kind of tentatively, with Dang and Bowen zeroed out. We'll make some adjustments there. Jameer Watkins still the star of the team, though, on paper at 8.2. It's a great price for him. Expect him to play heavy minutes. Malik Ewan's minutes have been all over the place. He's been playing under 30 in each of the last 3 games. That's a little bit worrisome. Right now I have him at 28 minutes, and that may feel a little bit high, but without Taylor, they need to get him back to 30. That's been concerning. Taquan Davis, Justin Thomas, both of those guards playing decent minutes. And then we did see the return of Chandler Jackson, who played a sizable, healthy amount in their last game as well. He's priced down at 4.6. Was in the starting lineup against BC, played 34 minutes. So right now I have him right around 30 minutes played. He only scored 13.5 fantasy points, but another value on the team, a favorable matchup for the most part against Notre Dame. So somebody we can definitely look to. You see projects pretty well at 30 minutes there. I think coming back for that first game can be a little rusty for most players, and we don't take that into account enough, or we maybe overlook or don't appreciate when players come back their first game from an injury and they absolutely detonate. A lot of times it's the opposite. We sometimes don't factor that in. So I do think Jackson a little more acclimated and engaged in this game here, especially against Notre Dame. So another one that we're going to have to pay attention to the news. That is a very key part of this slate. That news, or I believe, for FSU, because there's that value, and obviously the news for Iowa to see who's going to start. And then later on, when we get to Florida, we're going to see there's some value emerging from Walter Clayton's injury. So there's a bit of news here, and the slate locks a half an hour earlier than usual. So be aware, it's that second window, those games at 4 p.m. PST, 7 p.m. EST. There's about 5 or 6 that start at that time, most of the slate. So it's going to be rapid fire news hitting. Make sure you're in the Discord war room. Hit my DMs up if you're not. I will try my best to keep you up to date on everything going on. We'll retweet on Twitter as well. Going to be a very chaotic and stressful lock. You thought Saturdays was stressful and chaotic? This one might be even more. As far as Notre Dame goes, man, I was real irritated at Notre Dame because they were on that, secondary, the night slate. Playing against Miami, The Virginia stack that was super chalk against Miami last time they were on the slate absolutely nuked. Why would we not think Notre Dame stack wouldn't work? Tay Davis should have gone nuts. Marcus Burton. Burton had an okay game, honestly, in the second half, but Tay Davis was horrible. And overall, Notre Dame looked very, very bad. And you can see, they're 2.5-point dogs against a Florida State team that may not have two of their rotational pieces. But Notre Dame just lost 63-57 on the road against a Miami team that has absolutely quit on the season. Now, Florida State was also announced earlier, Leonard Hamilton, who's been around the game for a long time. I know he looks 40, 45. The guy looks young, but he's damn near 80. He might even be 80. He's very, very, and he's an eldersman. And he's calling it quits at the end of the year. And that's just another one of those, we're in the NIL era, we're in the transfer portal era, and a lot of these great coaches, the Jay Wrights of the world, the Roy Williams, they're just not able to handle this newfound GM role that you have to have. You got to recruit to keep your own players. Like, it's very hard. And we're seeing some of these great coaches from the past are really struggling with it the last couple of seasons. It's easy to sit there and be like, well, Leonard Hamilton, the game's passed him by. Florida State's horrible. It was only a couple of years ago that Florida State had like one of the best, most incredible tournament teams. They frequently butted heads with Gonzaga in the late season. Those late 2010s, early 2020 Florida State teams, the Terrence Manns, Trent Forrest, Mifiando Cavangeli. Shout out to Mifiando, my guy. They had some, really, really good players for DFS for a long time. Not only that, but they also went deep into the tournament. And they were a very dominant squad. They made a run throughout. Like, let's pull up Lenny's page real quick. So it's easy to look at them and be like, damn, they were 9-23, 17-16. Like, what's going on with this team? Well, they dealt with injuries, yes, but let's look here. 2016, 20-14, 2017, 26-9, 2018, 23-12, 2019, they were 29-8. In 2020, 26-5. After 2020, things started to fall apart a little bit, but that 2020 team was really freaking good. It's unfortunate because COVID kind of robbed us of that Dayton squad. They robbed us of this squad. This was the one that had Trent Forrest, MJ Walker, Patrick Williams, who, did the one and done thing. Can imagine what he could have done doing. Devin Basile, Anthony Pollate, Rickwan Gray. Like, the list goes on. This is a Florida State program that just absolutely detonated time and time again. They had that close loss in the Sweet 16 the year before against Gonzaga. That was with my man Mifiando Cavangeli, Terrence Mann, Trent Forrest. That was a really good squad. I mean, this is a really good Leonard Hamilton, a really good basketball coach who the year before that as a 9 seed, they beat Gonzaga. So really fun to watch. And I want to put that in perspective when we're seeing a lot of people on Twitter kind of talk their shit and say what they will. But Leonard Hamilton is a dude, and he's been there for a damn long time, but can't be too proud to say the game's passed you by. Anyhow, that's going to be tough. You could see the reason I'm bringing that up and yammering on about that is you could see, one of two ways, really. There's not going to be any middle. Like, the team may just kind of gather around and go on a run here, regardless of who's available for Leonard Hamilton's last season and try to go out with, a decent record and maybe try to make some noise in the ACC tournament, or everybody's going to kind of lay down, fold, and call it a day. So we'll see. And it'll become very obvious, very prevalent right away in this Notre Dame game, which route the team will be taking. So it's a very interesting spot to bet. I'll be curious to see where that closes. I'm certainly not comfortable betting Florida as a 2.5-point favorite right now. If Taylor doesn't play, Jerry Dang, not as much. If Taylor Bogoin plays, then I'm okay with it. And I'm certainly not willing to bet Notre Dame, even though it's a pretty favorable spot to bet them, I'd say, after what we just saw against Miami, because that was a dead carcass-like performance on Notre Dame. Looking at their projections, they're okay. 9K for Marcus Burton. We're probably not going to get there. He's a luxury play. We don't see a lot of ownership on him from a game-to-game basis, but he has a nice GPP look. Tay Davis is interesting at 6'9". Really didn't like the performance there. I do think he could do some damage against FSU. FSU has the guys. They have the size. and they can defend a little bit, but we have seen them give up a pretty big number to opposing front court players. Malik Ewan has not been as engaged lately, and if they don't have Taylor Bobone on the boards there, we could see a pretty nice bounce back game from Tay Davis. Secondary options like Braden Shrewsbury, Mataloko, Kevin and Jai are all pretty expensive. Shout to Sir Mohammed at 3-2, near min price. Did play about 14 to 15 minutes. Don't mind throwing him in if you're doing some MME stuff. It is a name to kind of keep aware of because he has been pretty damn good when he's on the floor. He's just not getting all those minutes just yet. All right, moving on to the next game here. We have Vanderbilt versus Florida. Takes us into another injury designation place. Right now we have a total of 156. Florida is favored by 12. My God, what a brutal performance for Florida. That was, going into that slate, it was all about, okay, what can we get out of 10 here? They're not going to have Igor Milicic. They're not going to have Zakai Zeigler. We got all this value. We had the Vol stacks, which of course did extremely well, but betting wise, it's like, okay, this is a really easy spot to bet Florida. They not only did they not win, I had my brain to put Tennessee. Not only did they not win, but they were just dead to rights. Speaking of carcass, they were dead to rights. Did not even register 50 points. That is so brutal. And you can say, well, Walter Clayton hurt his ankle. He played 27 minutes. They were just at no point were they ever in that game. And that just speaks volumes to anybody can beat anybody in the SEC, truly. I mean, the last bracketology, or one of the first ones we saw from Joe Lenardi and a few others, has like, I don't know, 80% of the SEC in the field right now. Absolutely unreal. And it just speaks volumes to that. Not having Zakai Zeigler or Igor Milicic, and Tennessee still getting the job done in a dominant fashion. So look for Florida to bounce back here. But yeah, we got big news with Walter Clayton. One of their best scorers is going to be questionable with the ankle injury. There is a myriad of value that opens up here if Walter Clayton can't go. We're talking about a guy who plays 32 plus minutes, has a usage rate extremely high, takes a ton of shots. He was very ineffective in those 27 minutes against Tennessee. We'll see what happens here. I have a feeling that he's going to do the warm-up thing, and we're going to have to really just kind of, be ready to make a decision. Where we get interesting here is the value pieces. The prices have dumped after such a poor performance. We are getting a depressed price on several players like Elijah Martin, who drops from 8.4 down to 7.4. Alex Condon, who goes from 8.5 down to 7.3. And then you have Will Richard, who was sitting there at 7.5, drops to only 7.4. His price is pretty stagnant regardless of his performance. He's always priced around this range, but really big discounts on Martin and Condon. And I think either one of those guys would be viable. But where it gets interesting is the second tier of plays down here with Thomas Howe, who is at 4.9, Denzel Aberdeen there at 3.7, and Sam Alexis at 3.1. We haven't seen a whole lot of Sam Alexis in the non-con. He was playing pretty sizable 16 to 20 minute roll off the bench. Now he has barely been playing, but in that Tennessee game, it was a blowout, but also there were some injuries and some other stuff. He played 15 minutes, priced there at 3.1. He only scored 4.5 fantasy points. But again, it was a brutal performance overall for Florida. At near min price, if he can eke out 15 to 16 minutes, perhaps. Obviously, he doesn't play the same position as Walter Clayton, but I think there's an opportunity for them to go a little bit big at times against this Vanderbilt team. So we'll see. Right now, he looks like an interesting value at the very least. Thomas Howe at 4.9. I mentioned him the last couple of Florida slates. I do really like him. He was a strong performer in the non-con. He had a huge game against Georgia, and you see his minutes have really solidified. Early in the season, he was playing this 24, 25-minute role. Then he went to a under 20-minute kind of reserve role in SEC play, and now he's back to playing 24 to 25 minutes. Some of that has to do with Alex Condon getting into foul trouble, and Ruben Chignello also isn't going to be sitting there playing 30-plus minutes typically. So there's a nice role for Thomas to play these big minutes, and he's looked pretty solid in the last two. Even in that game against Tennessee, he pulled down 10 rebounds. He only shot 1 of 6, but super active. I do think he's an interesting look. Probably one of the sneakier plays because he's 4.9. He's not a super value, and I think most people are going to try to get to Elijah Martin or Alex Condon or go down here and play somebody like Denzel Aberdeen, more of the natural fit to start if Walter Clayton doesn't. Aberdeen played 24 minutes against Tennessee, 21 against Georgia, because that game was out of hand. So we can expect him to see a sizable boost in time. Right now, I have him tentatively right around 25 minutes. As a starter, he would be absolutely a solid overall play. Let me get to the right KenPom page. Still, I'm on Florida State's 2019 KenPom page. Live starry-eyed about that. Aberdeen, 21% shot rate, shoots about 32% from long range, but super active. Very good option overall as a value. So you see 3 different injury situations. Iowa with Owen Freeman. We know he's out, so we're going to see who starts. Florida State with Taylor Bobo and Jerry Dang. There'll be some value there. And then, of course, with Florida and Walter Clayton. So we definitely going to be plugged into the news and really going to be hard to set it and forget it. If you're playing at all, you're going to have a lineup in, of course, but you're going to have to be ready to make changes based on that news. Obviously, a preference towards the starters as usual, but there is going to be some bench pieces here that we can look to and perhaps get some depressed ownership on because people are just too worried about using them. Ruben Chinyello as a starter at 4.7, also interesting. He gets into foul trouble all the time. It is on paper a good matchup for him overall for the same reasons that I would like Thomas Howell. He's $200 cheaper as well. I think we could see some ownership on Chinyello, but I think he's more of a secondary look for me. I'd rather just play Thomas or go up to Alex Condon or Elijah Martin. Looking at it on the surface, Elijah Martin would be the play I'd want without Walter Clayton. Gosh, he could probably take 20-plus shots. I think Will Richard is a little bit of a sneakier play as well. He doesn't have a ton of upside, but he has those breakout slates. But there's a lot of different ways you can go here with Florida. My preference is to play Elijah Martin or go down and grab that value with Denzel Aberdeen, Sam Alexis, or my man Thomas Howell. On the Vanderbilt side, not as much interest. I think that this is going to be a big smack in the mouth against Florida after the way that they were embarrassed. The usual suspects, Jason Edwards, under 7K, high shot rate, their best scorer. So he's the one you'd want to look to. Devin McLaughlin projects the best. He's there at 7K. He'll be doing a lot of battling down low and rebounding. AJ Hoggart does not look particularly good in this offense. And then you have some value pieces like MJ Collins, Jalen Carey, Chris Mannion, but none of them are particularly exciting options. All of them pretty much just secondary looks at best and low end. Jason Edwards would be a bring back and a game stack if you wanted to go that route. But for the most part, I'm not there with Vandy. Let's move on to the next game here. Kentucky versus Ole Miss, a total of 157. We have some pretty high totals. So not only do we have value available and a slate that looks like it's going to be high scoring, but we have a ton of potential game stacks that we're going to see from our opponents because of all these totals that are 150 and above. Ole Miss right now, a 4.5-point favorite. That's fine. We have some injury news in this one as well. All right. On the Kentucky side, Andrew Carr is available. Will he get into the starting lineup over Ainsley Elmanor? I hope so. Carr looked good in the 18 minutes that he played. It's a little bit of, well, not ashamed. I won't say shut up. I was a little more annoyed, perturbed, embarrassed for the way Kentucky played against Arkansas. Not because I'm like, I have an allegiance to Kentucky at all. But I had a lot of Andrew Carr at low rostership, and I thought he was really good when he played, but they looked him off so much. Amari Williams took on more of the offense in that game, and it was fine, but clearly wasn't the answer. Otega Aoi was just so tired and gassed out. Like, I don't know. I ended up watching a lot of Kentucky games, so that was one I wanted to watch, right? And defensively, that was probably the worst performance I've seen out of Kentucky under Coach Mark Pope yet this season. And to have it happen against Arkansas and Coach Calipari, like, damn, what a gut punch. But I was really perturbed at the way that Pope used Andrew Carr. We saw him more in the second half, but I thought that they could have used a lot more of him. I think he should have been on the floor. If he could handle it for 20-plus minutes, maybe he couldn't. I'm not privy to the locker room situation there on that circumstance, but felt like they should have used him more. He grabbed some rebounds. He had some clutch shots. Like, they needed more Andrew Carr. Going into it, he's available. I think he should get back in the starting lineup. This is not a game that I think Kentucky can, I don't want to say afford to lose, but it would definitely be a disheartening loss, kind of put them in that Iowa State territory, who's now lost 3 in a row. Jesus Christ, what's happening? It's okay. It's okay, Cyclones fans. It's okay. This is happening now, not the end of the month. If it's happening in late February, then you can panic. But this would be a tough one for them to lose. Mississippi Old Miss side, Matthew Morrell is questionable. He's been kind of in and out on the injury reports. We've seen him pop up several times, then end up playing. I think that's probably going to be the same case here, but we'll still pay attention to it. There is some value to be had here for Old Miss. And a lot of times this year, when Ole Miss has been on the slate, we really haven't had to look to them. We haven't gotten burned by them for fading, and we did benefit on that massively huge Malik Diaz slate that he had at lower rostership. So that was a fine memory. But for the most part, we haven't really been paying attention to them all that much. They do have the 12th best or 12th highest defensive efficiency in the country per Ken Palm. Chris Beard's got his thing going on. They're 16-6 here. They have lost 4 of their last 5, so they're skidding a bit. But a really just a big game for both of these programs here. If Ole Miss can win, they do have LSU, South Carolina, and Mississippi State next, then Vanderbilt, then a very tough game against Auburn, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Florida. So they get a nice soft patch here before they end rough in that Mississippi State game. I'm not ready to concede on Mississippi State. I know every slate I'm like, this Mississippi State team's for real, and then they go out and lay an egg. We're not quitting on them just yet, okay? We're not doing it. We're not doing it. They're one of the teams that Ole Miss lost to. Granted, it was at home in overtime, but that's a discussion for another day. Anyhow, Ole Miss has some value here, and they played Auburn pretty damn tough recently. This is a team that's lost some close games. Dre Davis, Jalen Murray, Malik Diaz, Sean Padula, Matthew Morrell would be the starting lineup. If Morrell doesn't start, we can expect to see Devon Barnes slide in there. Barnes did start a few games over Murray. He's not particularly exciting by any means, but if he were to play 30-plus minutes at 3.8, there's another value piece that's going to be at least on the floor. My team is on the floor. Name that movie. So there's some interest there, at least for me. Right now, I have Morrell projected in. Dre Davis is extremely cheap at 5.2. He would be my favorite play. We know Kentucky, whenever on the slate, they're going to play pace under Coach Pope. Ole Miss doesn't necessarily play at a very fast pace. They're not a snail's pace either, but they do get after it. They can score some points. They have a 36th highest efficiency in offensively. They don't turn it over very much. The only thing they do struggle with was more than one, but rebounding, and that's where Kentucky comes in and can really take advantage here and have their best chance to win. I would say Dre Davis would be a lock, but I'm a little bit scared of the fact that he did play only 15 minutes since fouled out against Auburn. Maybe not that same level of concern against Kentucky, but I do want to note that he's fouled out 3 of his last 5 games: Alabama, Mississippi State, and Auburn. Auburn, obviously a tough front court. Janai Broome, they've got physical bodies everywhere. Mississippi State, they have a really handsy defense themselves. And the Alabama foul out, that's a little bit worrisome too. Pace game there against Bama. So Dre Davis is a great overall option at 5.2. It's clearly an underpriced look for him. If he plays over 25 minutes, I have him slotted for 25 exactly. But fouls, man, we have run pretty poorly on getting away from fouls and foul trouble players. But he is the one that I am the most interested in there. Especially if we can get him closer to 30. Malik Diaz at 6'4" is a nice GPP look. This spot against Kentucky, they're going to need him. He is such a versatile big. He's, not a Dutiero type by any means, but the fact that Diaz can take it inside out, definitely going to give those Kentucky front court players some trouble. An elite rim protector. He can score a little bit. He can get after it on the boards. Like, this is a good spot to target Diaz. I may stop short of using him in a main lineup necessarily, but I do think he can give Kentucky a lot of problems. And that's kind of similar, versatile bigs, what we saw for Arkansas. Zanavir, Ivicevic, he took a bunch of threes, maybe not necessarily Diaz's game, but he's capable. But Ivicevic gave Kentucky a ton of trouble. Dutiero gave them a ton of trouble. He attacked the rim often, got to the foul line, shot 10 of 12, had 8 rebounds, had a bunch of steals. Like, that Tiero game, I just feel like Dia can have a similar performance here against Kentucky and really do some big damage. We also saw Igor Milicic a couple of games ago against Kentucky, had 19 and 9 with 4 assists. So we're seeing these guys, and he can shoot threes. So a lot of these versatile bigs have really done well against this Kentucky team. So watch out for Dia. I think we get him at low rostership again. We're all over him on that one slate. We stayed on a little bit too long, admittedly, and he's had some rough games for us. Minutes kind of went, up and down. Chris Beard messes around with his rotation in the front court a little too much for my liking, but I think this is a game that Dia has to play a sizable amount. You can look here. He projects really well just at 25 minutes. If we get anything on top of that for Dia, he played 32 against Auburn. If he's talking about 30 minutes here or more, we could be looking at another huge slate-breaking performance. He's 1K cheaper than he just was over the weekend. Sign me up for more Malik Dia exposure. I do think we could see a lot more Jamean Brakefield as well in this spot against Kentucky. He's played 30 minutes in back-to-back games against Texas and Auburn. Wasn't as good against Auburn, but who was? 12 points, 5 rebounds. It wasn't a horrible performance. He's only priced at 6'5". He's a little bit higher than he has been in recent weeks, but he's been seeing an increase in playing time. And Beard is really relying on him a lot, trust him to a great degree. We saw Brakefield early in the season. Kind of seemed like he lost his role with Dia and all these transfers, but Beard started to go back to him now. So if not Dia or Brakefield, got to be Dre Davis between those three. Not as interested to pay 8-4 for Padula. He was a lock and load at VT for a long, long time. Not the case here at Ole Miss. If Morrell weren't to play, some extra shots for Padula perhaps. Jalen Murray is extremely cheap at 5-4, and he's playing a ton of minutes as well over the likes of Devon Barnes, whether he starts or not. But we've seen the usage and the shot attempts from Murray. They've gone way, way down, and he's shot poorly when he has got those opportunities. 0 for 6 against Auburn, 2 for 5 against Texas, 3 for 7 against Missouri, which isn't horribly, 42%, but you want to see a little bit more from Murray, and we know he's capable of doing so, but he's been very inconsistent here in SEC play. So some really cheap prices on the Ole Miss side. We want some exposure for sure. On the Kentucky side, no Butler. We know Lamont won't be there. Andrew Carr is available. Kirk Kriisa out long-term. Mari Williams had a pretty damn good game last time out, 42.5 fantasy points against Arkansas. That's caused his price to, he's plateaued a little bit at 8K. It's a little bit spendy for me, simply put, because of the fact that his minutes are really stuck in that 22 range. Maybe on a good day you get 25, but it's really hard for me to get behind that. He's been extremely efficient, and he's done enough on a fantasy point per minute basis to warrant consideration, but that just really kind of bothers me a bit there at that price. Same deal without Lamont Butler. Expect Otega Awe, Jackson Robinson, and Kobe Brea to all get that big benefit. Still like Kobe Brea, 5'6". He's extremely cheap. Brea's first game without Lamont Butler, he was exceptional. And that was against Tennessee, 18 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. He was much worse against Arkansas, but the minutes were still there. He played 29. He only shot 1 of 6 from long range. That's the problem with Kobe. We said that at the beginning before Tennessee. If he's not making his threes, he might not get there even at a cheap price. 5'6", it's that breaking point. You can still do a lot of damage to your lineup at 5'6", but that's still a semi-value point that we want to have some interest in. I really want to play Andrew Carr at 4-7. I want to be early on Andrew Carr. Andrew Carr has been a phenomenal collegiate basketball player for years, dating back to Wake Forest and here at Kentucky pre-injuries. Really thought Pope made an error by not playing him more against Arkansas. You clearly saw when he was out there, he was making things happen. He was a little rusty, a little slow, but I am curious to see if he enters the starting lineup here and gets back into it. If he does, I think I'm just going to throw him in there at 4-7. If he doesn't, I'll probably backtrack a little bit just because, hey, we have a lot of value at our disposal. There's all these injury situations. Yes, I want to have Carr, but I also don't want to get shot with another 15 minutes for him off the bench when I could take a sub 5K player in one of these other situations like Florida, like Iowa, Florida State, who are going to play 25 plus minutes kind of guaranteed. So we got to kind of keep that in mind there. Lucky for us, all of these games start at the same time. So we're going to have all that information in front of us, but it's going to be happening fast. And we're going to want to talk this out in the Discord and kind of plan this out. And even as I'm telling you now, have it in your mind. What am I going to do if Carr starts? What am I going to do if Carr doesn't start? Taylor Bowen's in. if he's not, and have these plans ready for your lineup. That way, you don't just think of it as it happens with 2 minutes to lock and you're pigeonholed into a bad decision, like putting a utility guy that's from the early game or making some other stupid mistake like that. So be having these conversations or planning these out in your head early on. You don't want to get caught with your pants down in this situation. There are some spots you want to get caught with your pants down, but this isn't one of them. As far as anybody else on Kentucky, Brendan Garrison's minutes are just kind of piddly right now. He is priced at only 3.9, which I love. Brendan Garrison has exceptional fantasy point per minute numbers, and he has really pretty solid rates as well. He projects well all the time when he gets like 15 to 18 minutes, but he's just really kind of stuck in this, sub 15-minute role unless Amari Williams is going to be out. Typically, he's been backing up Amari, and he was getting close to 20 minutes there for a while. But now we're seeing the emergence of some of the younger players, and they're going with a small ball type of lineup. We did see Colin Chandler, who was on the mission for a few years, an older freshman, played 17 minutes against Arkansas. He also played 16 against Tennessee, so near min price. We're seeing him get more minutes, but he's been dreadful. But he's super rusty as well. And you're asking him to kind of step out from barely playing at all for months to now playing at Tennessee, SEC opponent, and then against Arkansas in an emotional game against John Calipari and the Arkansas Razorbacks. It was a little bit of a too big of a moment for him there. I still think he's interesting at 3.2 to a degree. But for the most part, Kobe Brea, a little bit of Andrew Carr there, and then potentially up to Otega Aoi in a bounce back spot. But the Ole Miss side is where we really want to pay attention to Morrell. And I will call it right now and say one of Brakefield or Diaz going to Brakefield the slate. So whichever you're more comfortable with there. I do think Brakefield gets a slight edge just because of the minutes, but Diaz has the bigger upside. All right, moving on to the next game here. We have Oklahoma State versus Houston. It's a total of 132. Houston is a 22-point favorite. Wouldn't you know it, we have more injuries. Wouldn't you know it, we have more value. Just about every damn game on this slate, we have value to be had. And Houston coming off a brutal, absolutely brutal spot where they lose in overtime on their home floor to Texas Tech. Texas Tech, JT Toppin gets tossed from the game. A little bit of a questionable call for him for it to happen. I don't know if you guys saw it, but I don't know that he should have gotten tossed out, maybe. And then also they have Darian Williams foul out, Federico foul out, and still they find a way to get it done. That was a brutal loss. Houston has benefited from some late heroics and some unlikely scenarios, and then that one really bit them. So bounce back spot here against a lowly Oklahoma State team, but we do have that injury news as I talked about. Manny Sharp, my man Manny, who has been struggling of late, will be out dealing with the ankle issue. Could only manage 17 minutes against Texas Tech. Only played 18 minutes against West Virginia. The ankle has become too much. He is not going to play. So that opens up a plethora of minutes and opportunities for others. And as you can see there with Houston, a DVP spot, because this is a fantasy-friendly Oklahoma State unit, most of the Houston guys with a pulse are projecting outrageously well. It starts at the guard spots. Milos Uzan, expect him to be a popular play there at 6'1". He is the best peripherals guy of the starters, and I know you'll look at his logs and be like, what the hell are you talking about? Only 2 assists against West Virginia, only 2 assists and rebound against Texas Tech. This guy's no good. He is. It's just they've been involved in some weird games. The West Virginia game got out of hand. Texas Tech game was crazy. He's had some turnover issues. He's had some foul issues. He has looked out of sorts. But he did have a 44 against a Kansas team. That was the one that was the unlikely, improbable, one in a million type of situation in which they won, and he was a big catalyst for that. He is a very strong play at 6'1" against Oklahoma State. Next up, you might look to LJ Cryer, but he's more of a secondary look for me, and I know he's been the best of the guard group of the last 2 games, so maybe people will be tempted to go there. He shot lights out. He's gotten to the line. He's been taking a bigger offensive role, and that's why he's there. But he's actually the least preferred option for me on this team. After Uzan, I go right to our guy, Terry Arsenault, who played 31 minutes against Texas Tech. would be the main benefactor and the one I would expect to absorb all of these minutes once again for Manny Sharp and get into the starting lineup. Now, perhaps it's Mielik Wilson, who's also going to get, a bunch of minutes, but I do think Terry Arsenault is the guy who steps in. Now, he is priced up a little bit at 5-1. He put up a 9.2 rebound, 2 steal game for about 17.5 fantasy points. Didn't necessarily warrant a price increase to 5-1, but they did it. Maybe that keeps people away for a little bit. Arsenault's got very volatile game logs. So you'll look through there and see, like, man, sometimes he's very engaged, sometimes he's not. And a lot of it has to do with injury situations, fouls, matchups, all of that. But when he's given the opportunity to play extra minutes, he has hit the ground running with those. He was extremely good against Utah in 33 minutes, extremely good against BYU in 24 minutes. List goes on. Toledo, all kinds of great overall games. He's been worse in conference play, but he's also seen less opportunities. 15 minutes against Kansas, 23 against West Virginia, then the 31 against Texas Tech, 33 against Utah. That was a major blowout, so we got the increase there, and he styled on them. 10 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 blocks, 3 steals. He's a mini stud. He is a garbage time hero, yes, but he can also get it done early in the game. So a starting level at Terry Arsenault at 5-1, you absolutely better believe I'm going to have heavy exposure. And he projects very, very well. Slate breaker status at 30 minutes. I believe he will play 30 minutes. I feel pretty confident in that. I think he might even play 32, 34. Once this game gets out of hand, I don't think he's even in risk of necessarily getting pulled either. I think he'll still get to play with that second unit. Mielik Wilson is another one to consider. Like I said, he could potentially be the starter. He's there at 4-9. Either way, he's going to play 20-plus minutes, puts him in a viable situation. He has scored 16-plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5. So he's been steady. He's taken a ton of shots. He contributes in all categories and gets after it on the glass. You also have Harvey Arfrenses at 4-6. It's kind of a break in case of emergency play, but in a blowout scenario, I could see him get a bunch of minutes as they want to maybe rest Juwan Roberts here, or JoJo Tugler, who gets into a bunch of foul trouble typically. Speaking of our guy, JoJo Tugler, elite rebounding rates, elite block rates. He has trouble staying on the floor because he's always habitually in foul trouble, but if he can stay on the floor, he can absolutely detonate this price point and just completely break the slate. We haven't necessarily seen it much lately, but he's capable. Against Kansas State, 13-10 with a couple of blocks, put up a 33, put up a 27 against Kansas, which was a 9.7 rebound, 5 block effort. He's going to have to block a lot of shots to break that slate, but at 5-5, I'm willing to take a shot there with him with a little bit of a shorthanded Houston team. And then lastly, at 7-2, Juwan Roberts, who doesn't necessarily see a lot of ownership on a game-to-game basis, but he's pretty much become the most reliable player on this Houston team. He's dealt with injuries. He's dealt with various viruses, but for the most part, he's out there and he's making things happen. The game against Texas Tech especially, 18.7 rebounds, 3 assists and 3 steals. He is just a very active player. Doesn't shoot threes, but he is versatile. Don't get it twisted. He can do a lot of damage in a variety of ways. Definitely like Juwan Roberts here as well. Oklahoma State side, you do have value. Bryce Thompson's price has shot up to 6-4 as he's been the best player on the team. So that was a viable value piece, but he just detonated against Utah, which everybody does. So his price point puts him out of play. Marcellus Avery and Abu Ousmane are usually the two that project the best for us, but it's against Houston. Arturo Dean, Myron Keller, Brandon Newman, all these value pieces that we kind of look to sometimes on slates that are tighter priced or we have a lack of value, we kind of go there. But this is not that slate. We have value everywhere. We have injury news that will provide even more value. And Oklahoma State's playing Houston as 22-point dogs. I'm not really too interested. I don't think you guys should be that interested either. So we're going to move on and coast into the last game, which I haven't talked a lot about pay-ups necessarily. Braden Smith, I'm very high on. I like the St. John's guys. But there's one player here that I'm very high on, and it's not Thomas Sorber. It's not Jaden Epps, don't worry. But we're talking in the Xavier game, Zach Fremantle, who is a very appealing price of 8.1K. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's get into it. It's a total of 140.5. I do think the over is live. Xavier is an 8.5 point favorite. Let's get them pulled up. All right. We'll start with the Georgetown side, which may or may not be without Jaden Epps. But at this point, do you even care? He's officially questionable, priced at 5.5 after missing their last game with an illness. He's dealt with an ankle issue. He's dealt with a hip. He's dealt with an illness. Just nothing seems to go right lately for Jaden Epps. And when he does play, it's a lot of empty minutes. 1 for 8 against St. John's. He bit a lot of us there. And then 3 for 14 against Providence. He bit a lot of us there. The question is, if he plays in a favorable spot against Xavier and starts, do you allow him to possibly bite you once again? Shame, fool us once, shame on us. Shame on you. Fool us twice, shame on us. Third time, it's completely inexcusable. Last time they played Xavier earlier in the month, exactly a month ago, actually, is when he got that first injury. Didn't get a chance to really see much from him there. He's been battling ever since. He did have the 15-2-4 game against Villanova, so he at least showed signs of life there. But, man, I don't know if we can use Jaden Epps at any point right now, even at a sultry price of 5.5K. Your top 3 pay-ups there, Malik Mack, Micah Peavy, Thomas Sorber. Expect big minutes for all of them. If you want to pay up for Sorber, I don't mind it. I think I'd be more apt to use him at home, just avoid some foul trouble there, but he's definitely a great overall play. He had 12 and 5 against Xavier last time in 35 minutes. He had some early foul trouble there, but he got through it. But they neutralized him for the most part. He wasn't particularly great. His price, it's fair, but we're not necessarily going to see him put up a ceiling game in the spot, I don't think. Micah Peavy, he's playing every single minute of the game out of necessity. We know he has a major upside. He's eclipsed 30 fantasy points in 3 of his last 4. The Xavier game, he had 15 and 10, double-double against them. 8.3, it's a fair price. And then Malik Mack at 7.6, who was really good, scored 26 real against Xavier. He got into a battle with Conwell and their guards, and they really had to rely on him after Epps went down. We know Mack, he's gotten in a lot better after, a couple of months under his belt transferring from the Ivy League. He's definitely a viable option at 7.6, but a bit of a luxury play and more of a mid-range, semi-balanced type build. And with the value we have on the slate, I don't know that a balanced build is necessarily the way we're going to want to go. But we can go semi-balanced to a degree after we grab Braden Smith. Then you get into the values. Drew Fielder's a starter, but not a lot of interest there. Curtis Williams will get 20-plus minutes if Epps doesn't play. And then Caleb Williams will start if Epps doesn't play. We saw 36 minutes against Butler. He didn't get that much ownership. When Epps was ruled out in the Butler game, we saw more for Curtis Williams because he was cheaper. Caleb did come through, though, at only 3.9, 19.5, 8.6 rebounds. He was solid. Don't love him. It's not the big-time, high-upside, slate-breaking performer, but he's typically going to give you a close to value score at these prices if he starts Epps out and he's playing 30-plus minutes. Kind of like Day-Day Ames. Day-Day Ames keeps giving you these passable scores like Caleb Williams, and then just out of the blue, Day-Day Ames puts a slate-breaking score like he did today. Perhaps Caleb Williams could be in for a similar performance, but 4 or 5, 30-plus minutes, yeah, I'm in. The Xavier side is where I have more interest, though. I really, really like Zach Freemantle. As far as pay-ups go, I know he's maybe not a true pay-up at 8.1, but definitely a expensive to a degree guy. I'm going to be all over Freemantle. And he had a pretty nice game against Georgetown. Now, he missed 3 or 4 games prior to that. It seemed like he was going to be out for the year, and then he bounced back. They didn't start him, but he played 31 minutes against them, 16 points, 7 rebounds, had a steal, he had an assist. He was rock solid. Back in the starting lineup ever since, and absolutely just kicking ass. A really reasonable price. He's the highest priced player on the team, but 8.1. This is one of those safe floor options where he's just going to continue to churn out 30-plus. I don't think we see him go under that mark really very often, and definitely not here. Did have some foul issues against Creighton, which cost him. He only played 24 minutes, but he put up 31 against them. And just think what he would have done if he put up his normal 36 to 37 minutes. So that's why I'm so high on him. They can get some fouls on Sorber early. Fremantle, he takes threes. He's another one of those versatile bigs who can kind of take it on put it on the deck or shoot. Really, really solid look. I have him around 35 minutes. You can see here knocking on the door of nearly 40. He's just a very strong play. And I'm not convinced that he's going to be super chalky because I think people are going to go Braden Smith like we will. I think people are going to go some St. John's guys like we will and then look to the Sorbers or another pay up above 9K as well. So it doesn't leave a lot of room for Fremantle. Now, maybe that's a pipe dream. Maybe everyone's on Fremantle, but he is an extremely nice play here in this spot. There is going to be very few lineups I roll out there that don't include him. As for the rest, all passable options, viable to a degree. Ryan Conwell, Davion McKnight, Dalen Swain, and Marcus Foster kind of round out that starting lineup. Dante Maddox, Jerome Hunter, John Hughley as the rotational pieces. Swain would be next in line after Fremantle. He's a bit spendy at 7-1, but we know what he can give us. Stocks, peripherals. He is a very strong overall option on a game-to-game basis. Guard forward eligibility, and he's really turned it on. 11, 6, and 2 with 3 blocks, 2 steals against Creighton. That's automatic 31 right there. Against UConn, 15, 3, and 4 with the block. 16, 5, and 5 against St. John's. 12, 9, and 3 against Marquette. Like, I just love the way Dalen Swain plays. I oftentimes find myself wondering why I don't roster him more. We're paying a premium. He's 7-1, but this is a great spot to do it. It's the most expensive he's been since, I believe, mid-December. So it is expensive. It is a top-tier price. It's only 1K less than Zach Fremantle, but he's definitely in play. Mini stack of Xavier, perhaps. Those would be the two I'd want to get to. Davion McKnight is 6K. I do think Davion McKnight ends up being relatively chalky. 2 straight games under 20, but the minutes are still there, so expect a ownership spike. He had a 12, 5, and 4 performance against Georgetown last time out. He's just a really nice look over. He's typically going to give you 4X at this price, so I understand the ownership there. Ryan Conwell, if anyone's going to get into a battle scoring the basketball against Malik Mack, for example, it will be Ryan Conwell. Little bit still too much at 6'8" for me to probably roster in a main lineup. I want to see that price come down a little bit more, but we know he can put up 30. Another one of those kind of safer looks there, but maybe lacks some of that upside. Cheaper at 5K is Marcus Foster. I have trust issues with him. I'm sure all of you have trust issues with him. He can get hot and score. He can contribute in all other categories, but he plays a lot of empty minutes as well. So we have this value available to us. He's probably more of a bottom tier value if you're just kind of building out some alt lineups, but he is there. He is capable. And then at 3.9, tournament shot at Dante Maddox. When he steps in, he's chucking threes. If he gets hot like he did against UConn, he'll deliver a 23 at this price. If he's bricking shots, not making them like he didn't too much against Creighton or Villanova, he could potentially give you a single-digit performance. So tread carefully there, but absolutely in play. But Zach Fremantle and Dalen Swain are a nice pairing option there if you want to get to that direction as a last game kind of hammer play. That duo could give you a 70 or 80 at minimum with upside for more. All right, so that is the slate. Let's pop up this. We'll get a core in, some best bets, and then we'll get out of here, and we'll get some sleep, we'll get some rest, and then we'll be up early back at it. We are getting a flurry of snow falls up in the Pacific Northwest. Told my buddy in Michigan, was complaining about, hey, it's snowing. It's not really sticking, but hey, they had a 2-hour late to school. What is this shit? February is when we usually get snow out here. And, it's kind of just complaining, bitching, doing what we do. And he told me, to basically, shut up or come live in Michigan or Minnesota or one of those places because you don't know true winter weather until you do. Slightly below freezing is a tropical heat wave for a lot of you in the Midwest. So I understand that, but yeah, cold lately, cold. All right. You guys jazzed for the Super Bowl too, I'm sure, huh? Some prop betting stuff to get in here. The FTN team is hard at work there on that as well. While I'm loading this, I'll talk about last year on the Super Bowl. I went to DK and I was at the kiosk. And normally when I go to the kiosk, I do my thing. I got my notes and everything that I'm putting in. But for the Super Bowl, I just kind of went into it like, you know, let's see what they got, that's some prop stuff and kind of taking my time and just doing what I normally do, which is that, well, like I'm in my spot for a long time. And there were people getting mad and heated. And they weren't like directly telling me to get off the kiosk. It was just like people in the back, like, what's this motherfucker doing? Why does it, there's all these people here. Why didn't you get off? And I'm just like, talk about me. And but they didn't come to me, so I just kept doing my thing for like 20 minutes, and then just walked away. And then people were like talking their shit. But yeah, just kind of funny how that worked out. So I think I'll go into it with a plan this time and not hold up the line, because nobody out in the PNW will beat anyone up. Not to take it to a political standpoint, but yeah, it was kind of funny to see how those people were getting restless. And you introduce alcohol and money, and things can get a little bit dreadful there. So I'll have a plan this time if I go there. Just a fun atmosphere though, for the most part. Thinking about going to Vegas on the tournament this year. I think it's a pipe dream, but considering that, then I can go hang out with my friend Johnny and wake up at 4 a.m. to try and get seats in front of all those TV screens. All right, let's see where we're at here. We'll deliver you a core. Yeah, there it goes. So you can see a lot of love for Houston, a lot of love for Iowa, or Xavier, Mr. Fremantle. So core for me, I'm going to take it. I'm going to go one pay up, one mid-level, one value. The pay up is Braden Smith. I think that we can easily make him work. The matchup is fantastic against Iowa, obviously, and I think we lock in those big points. Yes, it's a high price, but just to be able to kind of really expect the 40 at worst and possibly even get a 60, just too much to pass on. Zach Fremantle is core play number 2. The more I look at it and think about it, it's probably a pipe dream to think he's going to be low owned, but I'm hoping, but really like him. So that's core play number 2. And then the third will be one of the Iowa values. Right now, I'll say Seydou Traore, because I do believe he's going to see a huge spike, and he's the most talented of the group. But we'll make that determination as we get closer to lock and starter news. And then kind of the 1B to the value 1A of Seydou Traore is Terry Arsenault, who you can see projects all the way up there as well. Traore and Arsenault, 2 of the highest projected that I have right now, with the expectation that they play huge minutes due to injury situations. Elijah Martin, other Florida pieces, Denzel Aberdeen, Houston pieces, Juwan Roberts, Milos Suzan, JoJo Tugler. That player pool there is very strong. And if you pull from that and really kind of focus on that group, I think you'll end up very, very profitable by the end of the night. But we can expect a very high scoring slate as well. All right, let's talk about some best bets. Let's get rid of that. All right. So I have 2 at the moment right now that I really like. One being USC, the Trojans, plus 2.5 versus Northwestern. Kind of feel like when we wake up in the morning that we won't have that. That'll die a little bit. So I want to get that in nice and early. Brooks Barnheiser, unfortunately, will be out for the rest of the year. His collegiate career coming to an end due to an injury unless they get a medical waiver, which I'm not sure they're going to pursue yet. That's a huge loss for Northwestern. Absolutely just devastating loss for Northwestern. That's the heart and soul of their team. They have capable options, but as we saw, in the game against Wisconsin, they were competitive without him. Jalen Leach had a big game. Nick Martinelli was solid, but Angel Saravino's young. Matthew Nicholson is foul prone. Ty Berry is streaky as they get. On the bench, you're looking at KJ Wyndham, Keenan Fitzmaurice, Justin Mullins. Not exactly the who's of the bench. Like, this is a very tough spot for Northwestern the rest of the year. And unless Jalen Leach is going to go into absolute FU mode, as he did, 23-7-7 against Wisconsin, pretty impressive. I think they're gonna struggle. So I'm going to take that USC plus 2.5. I do think that they are good enough to win. They don't have much of a bench right now either, but they are very strong in the starting five, and they are more talented for my money over Northwestern. The other one is St. Louis plus 1 versus UMass. St. Louis just a little bit tougher in my opinion, but a good spot. Do have St. Louis winning by 2 in this one on our team projections page. So I do take them at plus 1. I think that they're a better team than UMass for what it's worth, and we'll go with that one. So those are primary 2. There will be more. There's a little bit less games than I would have hoped for a Tuesday, but definitely still some options. Let's look at underdog and prize picks real quick. Got some prize picks boosts up in here that we are going to take advantage of over the next couple of days. All right. So Peyton Sandfort over 15.5 points versus Purdue. Naturally, he's going to be taking a lot of shots as he always does. So even if Freeman played, I would be looking at Sandfort anytime they have him at 15.5 or less. I like the over, so we'll take that. That's over on Prize Picks. Going to get that right now. VCU taking on LaSalle. LaSalle is a fun team, but Jack Clark over 8.5 points. Like my man Jack Clark, hit a couple threes. Should be able to get that for us. Old Miss taking on Kentucky. Malik Dia over 10.5 points. Like that one very much. There's several, like all the Old Miss guys' point totals are playable here, except maybe Padula. Dre Davis 9.5, Jalen Murray 8.5, Dia 10.5, and Morrell 10.5. Like Dre Davis and Malik Dia's point props the best, over 9.5 and 10.5. Those two are very interesting to me. And then Zach Fremantle over 16.5 points versus Georgetown. I think this is just like a vintage marquee Fremantle game, 20-10. Just a workman-like performance here against Georgetown. Let me get the Fremantle special, please. Northwestern versus USC. We got St. Thomas 10.5 points. Wesley Yates at 14. Like a couple of these. Jalen Leach is at 16.5. Some interesting totals there. I do lean into the St. Thomas over 10.5 points prop there. Bryson Goodine of Oklahoma under 8.5 versus Auburn. No. Just say no to Bryson Goodine versus Auburn. UCLA versus Michigan State is an interesting matchup. I do see on our betting Discord, Mike Randall likes the UCLA side. Still pretty big on Sparty, but definitely a tough spot here against the Bruins. Tyler Bilodeau over 12.5 points. He looked right as rain after missing a couple of games in their last one. Bilodeau did not look like he was somebody who had just missed a ton. San Jose State taking on Fresno State. That means we have my tried and true points plus assist prop for you know who. Let's pull it up here for old Willie McClendon, former UCLA Bruin. They only give us a point prop for McClendon so far. We'll check in the morning. The number one most profitable prop on Prize Picks for the college basketball season for me this year has been Will McClendon over 12.5 and 13.5 points plus assists. Looks like they're not offering that right yet, but it's been sitting around 13.5 most of the time when it's on there. You can take it up to 14.5. He's just money. He's money in the Mountain West against inferior competition. It is on the road against Fresno State, but they are 3.5-point favorites. So keep that in mind there when you're looking for some props. That is one I like quite a bit. If we get it, 12 points, not so much. Let's see if they got it on Underdog. They do not. They do not. They don't want to give us any Will McClendon props. But we do have a couple here on Underdog that we do like. Zuby over 14.5 points plus assists. Not a big assist guy, but I do like him to score 15 real. That just gives us a little bit of extra. Have him at 15 and 6. So 14.5 points plus assists and an assist and a half. So that should put us there. We'll take that over. Let's see here. I do like the Luchai Patterson over 17.5 points plus rebounds plus assists, PRA there. That is a favorable number against Penn State. He's the one that I'm kind of trusting the most here. Remember earlier in the show, I didn't mention that. Malik Dia has a PRA number of 18.5 on Underdog. I do like the Dia game here. Breakfield's 20.5 PRA. Still fine, but Malik Dia, give us another legacy game. I know you've already done it once, but we'll take another. No Elijah Martin props there as they wait for Walter Clayton news. So that makes sense. Let's just check Fremantle props compared to Prize Picks. 16.5 points. We knew that. With no fantasy total. 23.5 points plus rebounds. Okay, yes, over 16.5 for Fremantle there as well. I was kind of wondering if they'd give us a fantasy point total, but they didn't. And then one more here. Guards versus Indiana. They've got two good ones, John Blackwell and John Tanya, as Wisconsin takes on Indiana. It's 9 p.m. EST. John Blackwell over 20.5 PRA. John Tanya over 21.5 points plus assists. They're both going to dominate against Indiana. They've been terrible against guards all season long. So that'll take us to the end there. We got DFS, we got props, we got bets. We're feeling good. We're going into the week feeling great. Yes. Malik Dia, do you remember when he gave us that massive masterpiece of a game at relatively low rostership, and the projections had him great, and it was like we just gotta go with Dia. He has minutes, haven't been great, but we just gotta go. It's Bama. It's a DVP spot that's developing. He delivered us a legacy 23 and 19. Can't sit here and tell you he's going to give us 23 and 19 again, but yes, this is a great spot for him, and I do think he ends up relatively low on. Just a bonus that he's going to be 6'4" instead of 7'4". So yes, indeed. Let's get Dia part 2 on this one. We'll be back tomorrow night, same time, about an hour and a half after the night slate ends. It is an 8-game night slate, 8-game main on DraftKings. There will be coverage for both. That's projections, article, and Discord coverage all day long. Rest assured, that'll be happening into Wednesday as well and all day Saturday. Shows for the rest of the week, tomorrow night and Friday night. And then in the next 2 weeks, we'll be expanding out to 4 a week. At the end of the month, we'll be going to 5. And as we get into Selection Sunday and the first week of the tournament, we'll be live each and every day, breaking down NIT, CBI, CIT, and play-in games. Because we do it all here. You guys know we eat, sleep, and drink this college basketball. We love it. You guys continue to support us. I definitely appreciate that a great deal. So with that being said, we'll get out of here. on the way out, please, if you haven't done so already, please make sure you smash that like button. It is a tremendous help to us all. And let's get after those green screens and window trips. See you guys.